Radio Espial is a series of podcasts brought to you across the internet by TIPM Media. Presented by investigative journalist Mick Rooney, it covers a host of topics from international media, publishing, aviation, and technology. Thank you for listening to this podcast today.
You're very welcome to episode 14 of Radio Espial. Let's take it away. Okay, you're very welcome back. We're talking US politics tonight with the November elections coming ahead, and we'll be also talking about the COVID pandemic and the impact on arts and culture. Lined up for you. I'll tell you more about that in a second. You're very welcome to Radio Espial, www.radioespial.com. We broadcast to most major podcast and videocast channels, including iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. By all means, wherever you see this, like, subscribe, just hit the button. Let me tell you about the program and the guest tonight. As I said, our guest tonight is Linda Riesenberg Fisler. She's a political thriller author, the ideal guest to talk about politics in the United States with the up and coming November 2020 election. Let me tell you a little bit about Linda as far as our biography is concerned. Linda Riesenberg Fisler began working at Procter & Gamble in 1979. During her 26 years at the company, computer technology was in the early stages, and Linda's interests and assignments naturally migrated to this area, with projects from representing business requirements of computer systems to developing the technology needed by the users. Linda was one of a small number of non-college graduates promoted to management. Feeling stymied and hindered in the corporate world, she resigned from Procter & Gamble in 2006 to pursue a more creative way of life. Linda has written and published 4 novels in the Blind series, including her recently launched 4th book in the series, Cloaked. She has also published 5 self-help books ranging from time management to art instruction. Linda is also an artist. She teaches oil painting and drawing at the Middlestown Arts Centre, and previously worked for Kevin McPherson through 2006-2009, who was an internationally known master artist, as his assistant, and launching a mentoring website called Artist Mentors Online. Utilizing her art skills, Linda creates her own book covers. She's also a producer and host of podcasts, including Artcast with Linda Riesenberg Fisler, focusing on painting skills, and interviews with today's master artists. Cloaked, the Blind Series Novels podcast, features Linda reading her novels and relevant discussions on the books. In 2019, Linda presented an academic paper at the Representational Art Conference on the connection between imagination and creativity, exploring if the link was a conscious one. In the summer of 2019, she, her husband, and 2 cats moved from Ohio to Asheville, North Carolina. Linda is currently writing and researching book 5 of the Blind series novels, which focuses on the premise: if something politically different happened in the 1980s, would we be where we are today? Linda's research involves aspects of the CIA, FBI operations, historical occurrences and their impacts today, and exploring alternative paths that could affect today's current events. I think you'll agree she's probably the perfect guest to discuss today's theme when fiction becomes reality. We are talking politics in the United States, November 2020 election. We are going to touch on the pandemic COVID-19. We'll also touch upon the impact that the pandemic has had on arts and culture. Okay, so as always, the best thing to do is let's go and talk to Linda.
Okay, welcome back to Radio Espial, and Linda joins us now from North Carolina, isn't it, Linda?
Yes, North Carolina now. Moved to Asheville, so
that's over the last year or
so. A little bit
of
a blue island. Yeah, right. It's a little bit of a blue island in the middle of a red state, so it's kind of interesting down here.
I'd say so. Yeah. I think what I said to you yesterday or the day before is I don't know whether we're going to have sparks or fireworks today, but certainly it's a topic, politics in the United States. We're probably, I think inevitably now, it's becoming a theme for my recent podcasts, that you can't have an interview without touching on COVID. So I'm sure COVID is going to come up. COVID seems to be intertwined in every aspect of our lives now.
Right.
And I'm sure we'll touch on that. And Linda, you're an illustrious guest now, you see, because you're only my second guest who's appeared twice now on our podcast. So there you go. There's one for the bow, the medal.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting
You're very welcome. I thought you were the
Me
ideal
back on.
guest.
So yeah, the first time I think oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, in 2016, I think was the last time we talked, and that was just right after the election with Trump. So
Indeed.
kind of interesting.
And it seems like an age ago, an absolute age ago.
Yes, it does. So there are ways when it feels like it's been very, very quick, the passing of the last 3.5, almost 4 years, and then there's times when you really wonder if you're going to be able to make it to the election date here in the U.S. So, and then naturally all of the concern and anxiety around what's actually going to happen after that election. It's the tension's thick.
Our I suppose a topic of explore the topic, the name of essentially the subtitle I put on the program is When Fiction Becomes Reality. If people are not familiar with you, you're a political thriller writer.
Mm-hmm.
Just briefly, Linda, just give us a kind of synopsis of growing up and how you ultimately became a writer and where you are sort of now. But I'd also like to reflect as you think back on your times of growing up, influences and the impact perhaps the media has had, because we're probably going to touch and talk an awful lot about the media today, because they're now playing a critical part in this whole run up to the election, as they have now for many decades.
Yes, of course. So I grew up just Southwest Ohio, and I guess I started really paying attention to politics and becoming interested in those events as they happened was because we went to see All the President's Men. And prior to that, I was a kid and I was in politics, and it was the biggest question I think that hit me at that time was, how can something like this happen? And isn't more of an uproar, or I was very isolated, let's say it that way, from any political talk with my parents or aunts or anything like that. So it was a big aha moment for me when All the President's Men came out. And of course, the Panama Papers were right before that, and I probably had very little knowledge of that as going on. I mean, I was in high school. So left high school, started working at Procter & Gamble, and then C-SPAN hit, and I started to get really interested in politics at that time. And I mean, I can remember watching C-SPAN, and there's not a lot of people who say they would do that. So just to see the procedure and the politics and how things were going on. So my in politics started basically after high school, and I could probably thank Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward for making me more interested in what was going on in government at the time. And as time went on, I had always been writing since I was a young child, but it was more like which is why it's fiction, a physical insertion of me into the political realm of what was going on in the late 1970s and 1980s. So my main character is kind of my alter ego. Become a lawyer. I wanted to, start addressing civil liberties and different things like that. So through the 80s and the 90s and even through to today, I have a lot of interest in politics. I, as you said, a political thrill writer. And the premise of the book became that I actually started writing in the 1980s. I had it published in 2015. It was, if something happened back in the 1980s drastically, I mean, we would have thought that, Nixon's impeachment proceedings and then resignation would have been drastic enough for America to wake up and become more involved. What typically that hadn't happened. So I came back with a premise of, if something really drastic would have happened in the 1980s, would we be in a different place than where we are today with the division and the anxiety and tension that we have going on, very, very deep division that we have going on. Was there something we could have done back then that would have changed where we are. So kind of a hindsight's 2020. I'm struggling with the constant, would it have made a difference at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose let's, if you go back there, we had the Nixon years, then into around about 1980, Reagan. And yeah, since we kind of over the last few days in posts on social media have sort of touched on this point, I'm also wondering, not so much I think we can all kind of figure out what's different now. It's rather more, had a President Trump come to power in the United States in 1980 instead of Reagan, would it have been different then than it is now? And I'm kind of thinking out loud. Um, of course, the Trump we knew back in the 1980s and 1990s, I think, was different to the Trump we have now. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, Trump back in the 1980s was a Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
So, and not as much as he thought he was in politics, he wasn't, in that he always said he was going to run for president. And there was noise back then. There wasn't a platform that was offered to him, let's put it that way,
Mm-hmm.
like there is today. And back at the time in 1980s, he didn't have the same connections as well developed as he does. So if he had come to power in 1980, the only thing that I could probably say was the American people, the Constitution, probably would have been done not so under a microscope as it is today. So that's one of the reasons why I consider us blind, because basically the only voice that the American people had at that point was writing your congressman. The middle class and lower class had very little influence other than to vote and write their congressman. And there wasn't email at the time. This was letters that were written and typically would probably be answered after a vote had already happened. So things were a lot slower back then. So I think, as far as getting away with a lot of stuff, he probably could have gotten away with a lot more without all of the media attention that we're getting. So I'm not sure. I didn't have my eye on the media as much as I do now.
Sure, yeah.
As I did back then, and mainly because we got 30 minutes to news a day back in 1980.
It was very much packaged in smaller segments, and I would say,
right. So
if the media has
right.
probably changed now, and we're talking about how has Trump progressed over the last 30, 40 years. I
Right.
think the media has progressed from being less of a reporting, here is the news, this is what's happened today, this is what X said, this is what Y said. Now it's become, this is what X said, this is what Y said, and we're now going to talk to four people and opinionate and opine on the impact of that. And I think that's what's different. I think it's
Yes.
what they call the talking heads
Yes.
era of media, which we didn't have back in the 1980s, even in the
Into the
early
90s.
1990s.
Yes.
News kind of just generally stuck to reporting, and if there was opinion or talk, it wasn't a part of the news, the delivery of the news itself. It was a later night segment. It was sort of your Don Lemon, style of and particularly that era of call-ins to the studio where people would give their opinion. The talking heads were less in the studio. The talking heads tended to be people, which is ironic in the way it's flipped now, because with people having so many opinions now. I don't know. Am I wrong? Am I right? Your thoughts on that?
No. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I guess another part of that is reality TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week news is somewhat, like you were saying, is based more on opinion and talking heads and their opinion, less on fact. And you, if I look back in 1980s and where Trump was in his life and who knew about him, we knew he was a millionaire or billionaire or whatever his status was at that time, and that he was a real estate mogul. But what we didn't know was his opinions and views, and we didn't really know, quote unquote, him. So
True, we'd only barely scratched the surface of Trump as person,
right,
as potential candidate, which I think for many times, although he repeated it many times, I still don't think, and I'm kind of reflecting now a little bit into the future I mean from the point of the 1980s, just say
right.
2015, 2016, when he announced he was running.
Mm-hmm.
And if we might just reflect, then I think the attitude then was, this is amusing, this will be interesting for a few weeks. This will be a bit of fun, and then we can, when he pulls out, we can get back to the normal run of the mill.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the time between 1980 Trump and the 2016 Trump, he had his reality TV show. He started to gather a lot of people to that show, The Apprentice, and started to gain a lot of people who's him. He also then started dipping his toes into political things, starting the birther movement when Obama was running, and all of the different things like that. So when he actually announced his bid and started running, everybody thought all he's trying to do is build a bigger base and start another reality TV show. It wasn't. He really was not considered a serious candidate at the time. So it's kind of really strange. And then all of the different things that happened during that election with, whether Russian meddling, whether he's a useful idiot, as the CIA would call him, whether Russia has something on him that, keeps him basically trying to make America a dictatorship and trying to figure out how to call the coming election, rigged, because if he doesn't win. So lots of questions over here about will he leave? And then somewhere in there, I think also happens some health issues and mental decline. And that's, we have to go with what is presented to us as far as his health is concerned. But anybody who has had parents go through dementia can see the signs. And sometimes I wonder if it is just him acting or if it really is where he is. Because sometimes he seems, he makes a fair statement, but the majority of the time it's very much
left completely out of field, completely out there on the edge of reality.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
we mentioned Reagan. Obviously, after that there was the Bush years, senior and junior, right. Then into the Obama years. I guess in reflecting what you were talking about there, and I'm saying this because I've always been intrigued by U.S. politics, and I always have to. Well, I can't. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I don't live in the U.S. I've obviously been to the U.S. a number of times. I spent time there, but I'm coming at this. I suppose I'm trying to represent the rest of the world.
Yeah, please.
The rest of the free world. But I suppose, I mean, I was born and grew up in Ireland. I now live in the Netherlands. I've been to other places in Europe. So I'm coming at this from a European perspective. Here's my question. And we can we can talk about Biden as well in this. Was there as much of an emphasis on the age of a president and the stamina of a president, because these are words, I think, and descriptions we're going to hear probably an awful lot more in the coming weeks when we get to the election debates, when they formally go one-on-one as the two primary candidates. Was that a thing in the 1980s, from your perspective as an American citizen and a voting American citizen? Was age and was capability and stamina, or is there a perception that I've sometimes had that, you know, maybe we inflate the position and presence and influence of the US president more than necessary? In other words, is it more about his administration or her administration when it's put together?
Yeah, definitely remember when Reagan was running that there was a lot of questions around his age at the time, because at that point he was considered, by the time he would get out of his 8 years of
quite elderly,
term, right? Yeah, he would have been in his 80s or just turning 80, I think. So that was definitely a question back in the 1980s. I remember that my first vote, when I was old enough to vote, was the Reagan election, and so it became very, interesting. And again, you're absolutely right that at that time, a lot of what was considered was who Reagan, what was his full administration, and how was that administration going to work, and was he going to put himself, where he was more or less the wiser of his administrative folks. So that definitely was, and the reaction to was Bill Clinton, this young guy who was an Oxford graduate and Rhodes Scholar, and all of these different. It was just a stark contrast, and you have to remember, in the last 3 or 4 years, Reagan mentally also had Alzheimer's, and we could see the decline. The famous scene of Nancy under her breath saying, "We're doing the best we can," and then he repeating that was, I
think in those final 2 years of Reagan's administration, I think there was I think even shall we say, the more sympathetic Republican inclined voters were getting seriously worried, that this man is not really where he should be. Effectively, I felt for the final 2 years, his administration was wholeheartedly running the show. He was just
absolutely
a figurehead at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you probably could also see that the appearances of him were also declining at that time. So we had this stark contrast of a young, vibrant person running against someone that was a little bit older, and of course the thing was about our future was Clinton's campaign rally. So he came across very energetic. It was an interesting contrast to the previous 2 to 4 years before that. So again, America was ready for change. And an interesting point is every candidate has run on change ever since.
Yeah, I know. But that's not even an American thing. Do you know what? I hear the most right of center and left of center people make that same argument. Vote for us or vote for me because I am the candidate of change. And
exactly.
We always end up then, like a few months later, wondering what actually changed. I certainly agree with you in regards to the Clinton years, and then the Obama kind of took that fold of, obviously these weren't exactly young men as such, but in presidential terms, they would have been considered two relatively young men, carrying out the role. I certainly think that was not so much a shock to the system, but that was different. And I think there was, remind me, who was contesting against Clinton originally when he came to power on the Republican side. That would have been.
Oh gosh, you think I would know this?
Yeah, I remember John McCain in the Obama years.
Right, it was McCain and Obama years, and
Was it,
well,
there was Mitt Romney.
Yes, he was one of them. Well, I'm trying to think. We went from Reagan to H.W. Bush.
Yeah.
And then H.W. served his
Junior, yeah.
Bob Dole? Or was
Bob,
he up against H.W.?
Bob
I think
Dole,
it was Bob Dole.
Yeah, Bob Dole could have been around the Reagan time, or maybe he ran a second time. Should have checked all this out before, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I should have too. I was actually focusing on.
Yeah, but I suppose my point being,
it was an older candidate.
In general,
it was an older candidate.
Yeah, in general, the Republicans have stuck to the tried and trusted method of, the sort of elderly, worldly statesman. Well, with the exception of Donald Trump, perhaps, who I think caught them all by surprise. Before I suppose we get to how the hell did we get here?
It was Bob Dole, by the way. I just Googled. Sorry.
I guess the first question that I would ask, and it's something that's come up right since the whole impeachment thing, is what happened with Nixon worse or not as bad as what's happening with Trump? I think I know the answer, but I want to still explore it.
Okay. So Nixon's article of impeachment started in the House, made it to the Senate, and basically the resignation came when it was so told. I see your kitty is visiting you.
Yes, he promised me that he would go asleep in his box, but has decided he's coming out.
Yeah, I was waiting for mine to come up and meow at me, so that was what's funny. But yeah, so the articles of impeachment started in the House, made it to the Senate. The vote came in, and the votes were not there to keep President Nixon in office. So he was basically asked to resign, and did so basically right before the vote, if I remember appropriately. But and then of course his was obstruction of justice, and there were two other, I think, impeachment counts against him.
But ultimately, I think it was his administration kind of took him aside and said, "Enough, Richard.
It was
the music's playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, he saw sense. He saw that this is over. I'm finished. I'm done.
What he didn't want to be was removed from office under impeachment by the Senate. No
president
resigned.
I'm sure Clinton
no president
didn't want to be either, and no more so than I'm sure Trump didn't want to be either. Although
that plays into his reality TV show.
I think Trump more relished the impeachment process than perhaps Nixon would have had it have went to that, but he didn't let it go to that, and certainly Clinton didn't relish. But I think when the Clinton impeachment came, I think deep down people knew this isn't going to get him. He'll be a wounded warrior, but this is not. Ultimately, it was about, I did have sexual, relations with that woman. I think we always knew it was going to come down to lying to the American people, but kind of like he's not going to be voted and removed.
But yeah, interestingly enough, they voted non-guilty, not guilty on the perjury charge,
Yeah,
but guilty of obstruction.
that's
So,
right. Yeah.
yeah, so basically what we had with Trump was colluding with the foreign government, obstruction of justice into that investigation. Which one do I think is worse, Clinton or the Nixon or the Trump? I would say from the standpoint of laws being ignored, the rule of law being ignored, the Constitution being ignored, I would say that Trump's impeachment is much, much worse. And honestly, he should have been removed from office, in my opinion. So I guess I should have stuck the facts there, right, Mick? But yeah, opinion-wise, I definitely think that what Trump has been up to is definitely should have been removed from office. We just didn't have the votes in the Senate.
I suppose we're getting to the core topic now, when fiction becomes reality. And the question I would ask now is, that I touched on just earlier, about 5-10 minutes ago, is how the hell did we get here? Because we all know that deep down, you know, and this is, I think this is, even with moderate Republicans, this is probably still something that rankles with them. Yes, Trump has his core base, and will always have that 30 to 35% core base, no matter what he does, the proverbial, even if he shoots somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Exactly.
But what I'm asking is, how the hell did we get here? And what rankles with me is how submissive one of the most extraordinary, strong political parties in the United States have got themselves into. Not only how did Trump get there, but how did they get themselves? I think we touched on it earlier as well. I think in 2015, going into the start of 2016, I don't honestly think people like Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz, I don't think had any comprehension that this would go very far, that this guy would drop out within 6 weeks. It will be a novelty, and then he'd be gone, and then we can get down to proper serious business. But somehow Trump managed to almost abduct the Republican Party and make it the party of Trump. How did that happen?
It's a really good question, and with a lot of the different investigations that have been done, there's people who believe that he is Putin's puppet. That I think a lot of the strategic that have been made through this, with the connection to the NRA, and there's just so much here to look at and put under the microscope. The election itself, with that, I read an NSA report that showed how far they got into the election system, and I worked computer systems in P&G, and I looked at that report and said, how can they get that far and not flip a vote? I don't understand that. I don't understand the whole the Russian operative that was part of the NRA, and I know about a lot of the money that the NRA was pumping into a number of senators and representatives' campaigns. So, I mean, the thing that I always come is what did they have on these folks that all of a sudden they didn't like Trump when he wasn't leading in the campaign, loved Trump when he was the candidate and became elected, and then just stood by him this whole time. I really don't know how or why they did this, other than it comes back to power and greed. And this, we want to lead, we want to be the powerful ones no matter what, regardless of rule of law, regardless of the Constitution. They've thrown the Constitution under the bus. I don't know how many times in the last 3 years. I lost count. So, and the same with the rule of law. it's just amazing. And I know that there are a number of books out there, some written by a Harvard professor, Seth Abramson, and then there's Michael Cohn's book, there's Bob Woodward's book. There's so much information that needs to be looked at. So much of the, I would love to see an unredacted report from Congress, so that I think really wrap your mind around it.
What we often hear the media, saying, and look, we all know there's a bias built into media networks, whether you're Fox News, whether you're CNN, whether you're ABC.
Right.
I suppose what I also have to get my head around is, and I know when, I think at one stage on my right did we have about 12, 15 Republican candidates back in 2016, and I know all's fair in love and war, and it's kind of like, and you look, when the best man wins and he's voted in, that's it, or best woman candidate is voted, that's it, we all have to fall into line and get on with it and make the bet. Now, I get that, I understand that about politics. What I don't understand is how a man like Ted Cruz can listen to the future president claim that his father was involved in the assassination, the Kennedy, in some involvement in the Kennedy, all these crazy things. When I think back to the things that Lindsey Graham, said, the man's a kook, he's crazy, When I think back to all those, and yet they fall happily into, not only fall happily into line, but take on administration positions as well. It's just mind-boggling to see it from the outside.
Yeah, it's definitely party over country. It's stepped way beyond that, and now it's party over country and constitution. So it's just this need for power and this need for greed. I mean, we've always, our politicians here, like you were saying, it's somebody gets elected, we have to stand on, we fall in line and say, okay, he's my representative or he's my president now. This election broke that. I mean, with the "not my president" hashtag, and people protesting, women especially protesting against, Donald Trump with the "not my president." And in all honesty, I don't consider Donald Trump my president either.
But isn't it an extraordinary thing to say? I've never, ever, even the most venomous, biased Democrat senators and representatives during the time of the Bush years, I have never heard that kind of thing. That man is not my president. That's
no, right.
Regardless of whether you voted or didn't vote or whatever. I've never ever heard that.
No, and we didn't. I mean, as much as I didn't care for W or well, I actually kind of liked his father, but I never said that W wasn't my president. I never went that far. I never heard other people go that far. There was a key part after 9/11 in 2001, and it rings in my memory where W was down at the World Trade Center site,
with the baseball
9/11 tragedy.
Yeah.
And Ground Zero, I guess is what. Yeah. So he was standing there, and I remember him saying over the bullhorn, "You're either with us or against us." And I was like, ooh, don't go there. And he meant it in a way of, talking to our allies of, you're either with us or against us kind of way. But I think America took that a bit further and then there was this thing of, when you got elected, you became a representative, a congressman, the president of the United States. So whether you liked it or not, you had to represent both sides. But from that, you're either with us or against us, and I'm not blaming W. So let's make that clear. But that got us into the thinking of, you either are on this side of the issue or that side. no compromise or negotiation that goes on between. And we live in a gray area. We don't live in the black or the white area. It's that negotiation and compromise that makes a democracy work. And we're not seeing that today. Now it's, you're either with us or against us. And if you're against us, we can't negotiate. And that's what I think is hurting the U.S. more than president. I mean, it definitely has its place, but he's taken that, this is the way it's going to be. And just everybody who fell into the line of with us or against us is just getting on that bandwagon. I mean, it's that to the jumped on it. And I mean, if our allies speak to us again in 6 weeks, I'll be surprised, so there's just been a very, they never have stepped away from party over country. It's been party over country, I would say, for the last 12 years. Mitch McConnell in the Senate didn't like the fact that President Obama was elected. And has had, I don't know how many bills on his desk that he has not brought to a vote.
Yeah.
And he has done that ever since he actually stepped it up after the Democrats took the House back, and has not brought, I think last time I looked, it was 800 bills that the House has passed that he has not brought to a vote in the Senate. And again, that just comes back to you're either with us or against us, and party over country.
That takes me to quite perfectly to the next point, and it's expanding on that polarization that we've had, and I really get irked, particularly on, well, I get irked all the time on social media, but in particular, this idea of Republicans bad, Democrats good, or vice versa, depending on your persuasion. And we have to get away from that, because we're going nowhere, regardless of Trump re-elected or Biden. We're going nowhere if we continue on that entrenched approach, because it simply isn't true,
Right.
And this, I think, is one of the reasons why, and all that's happening at House and Senate level is that they are reflecting the extremes that voters have in polarization. That they're just simply giving them what they want almost. And what I mean by that is, we all know that Republican voters are not bad. The Republican Party as such is not a bad party. We can hold them responsible for what's happened, but essentially they will argue, look, the voters voted for Trump. We put him up as a candidate through the primaries and caucuses. We didn't do anything wrong. That's mightn't have particularly liked the outcome, but we had to live with it. We made our bed, and we have to lie in it. But it's that polarization that we're going nowhere until we start listening and working both parties together. And there's such a void left with the departure and death of John McCain, who could do that, who could micromanage that kind of cross the aisle stuff. And there are other people in the Republican Party. I would say John Kasich is another man capable of, in that mold, capable of doing it. I don't particularly like necessarily his social policies as such. And I suppose I would say something similar perhaps about Joe Biden, and perhaps we should talk about Joe Biden. We've talked a lot about Trump. Maybe we should talk about Joe Biden. I deep down don't feel that the Democratic Party consider that Biden was ultimately the ideal candidate Now, maybe there's a lot in the party, and I think particularly the traditional bloc voters within the party who probably feel, well, he's our best chance. There was a time there he was on the ropes, and it was like, I don't think poor Joe's going to even see out the end of this. He's not even going to get to the Democratic conference. I don't know. Your thoughts on that? Is Joe Biden the best that the Democratic Party can offer?
Well, the Democratic Party is probably going to sit on my shoulder and say yes, say yes. But the answer for me is I remember Joe Biden when Joe Biden was young and in the Senate, and was the chairman of Tom Clancy's becoming a Supreme Court justice. And I remember him questioning Anita Hill. And it was then that I just sat there and thought, this isn't the brightest bulb in the desk drawer. Okay. So he was, I mean, we had the Senate back then had a wonderful mix of Democrats and Republicans that worked together very, very well. And I think that Joe Biden was very low on the list of, if you had to name these different individuals out.
The person to come to mind, yeah.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, is Joe Biden the best that the Democratic Party could have done? No. But Joe Biden was also vice president to Obama, which harkens us back to those 8 years when the United States was in a better position and better led. And I think that they're using him as a rally point. If you look at Joe Biden's record, his record is he is a very conservative Democrat. So he's more middle of the road than he is left. So there's a hope that he can bring the country back together. I hope he has a really good plan to do that if he does get elected. And because it isn't going to be just as simple as, I'm your leader, now let's all fall in line.
Yeah,
because that's not going to happen.
It's not going to work that way. Yeah, and that polarization, whether it's quelled somewhat, should Joe Biden win, it's not going to go away. Potentially, it become even, if it's even possible to believe, it could become even more entrenched. And the only thing I see breaking that is, I'm not sure it's going to happen, but the only thing I see breaking that is if the Democrats take the Senate as well. But that's a huge stretch to get there. They could narrow it by a couple of seats, but that's a huge stretch.
Yeah, it is a huge stretch. And even if that happens, I don't see the country reconciling itself. What will happen 4 years from now will be that the Republican Party, the GOP, will come back and start saying, we had all this rammed down our throats in the last 4 years because they had control of the House and the Senate and the presidency. And typically, if you look back, there's been short stints of time where a particular party has taken over both, all three powerful chambers. Okay. But it only has lasted for possibly 2 years.
Yeah.
The American public always saw a really nice balance in the executive branch being one party and the legislative branch being the other party. So, and that always kind of was our check and balance.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. I think you're absolutely spot on there. I think there's no doubt the American public, the typical, if there's such a thing, American voter, has always felt more comfortable if at least one of the houses, be it the Senate or the House, and ideally the Senate, has that final, is that there's a balance there, that this isn't the three aspects of the one face dominating and railroading things through. Because I don't believe that I could be wrong. I was wrong about Trump. I was convinced. I'll tell you this. I'll reveal this to you and remind people. Although I wasn't broadcasting back then, I said Trump is going to win this candidacy. And people said, stop, Nick, stop, don't be so ridiculous as that. I said he's masterful. Whatever you feel about him, he's masterful at that idea of debating and knocking pegs down. And
Absolutely.
he will be greatly underestimated. And he won the candidacy. But then immediately he won the candidacy. I thought, well, that's great, because there's absolutely no way. Now he's really finished. Little did I know. Yeah, I don't know. Your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah. As much as I'm a feminist and would have liked to have seen Hillary win, I wasn't a big Hillary Clinton fan.
No, I wasn't either.
So, I think she came across a little too scary. and so, but once the parties get behind their candidates, that there is a lot of energy and momentum there. And I think there is a inherent, and I said this last night to friends, pecking order that goes down when you look at the general conscience, if you will, of the United States. And, white man is definitely above that. So was there any discrimination among the voters? Did we get the right amount of turnout? What was really in the Russian meddling? What happened with that? All of that comes into play. But I think there were a lot of people who just flat out didn't see, for whatever reason, Hillary. They couldn't divorce their emotions from how they felt about Hillary Clinton as a person to how powerful a leader she would have been. So call it uninformed electorate if you want, but there was definitely a pull for going back to the way America used to be.
And I think to a degree as well, where are we now? For the past, well, no more, 12 more than 12 years, the Democratic Party have kind of never had a clean break, as it were, between the next election. Either,
right,
in Obama's case, re-elected, and then of course Joe Biden. Well, but he was the vice president with Obama. Hillary Clinton in 2016. Yeah, but
Secretary of
sure,
State.
She's sure isn't she Secretary of State, and she's part of the Clinton administration anyway. So what the Democrats have never managed to do over the past 12 to 14 years is break that continuum. That's whereas the Republicans have managed to break that association with the previous administration. Here's something new. And let's face it, it's like what we were saying earlier about, what does every voter want? What does everybody, what does every candidate promise? Change. It's always that buzzword, which I think with the Democratic Party, it's never quite been change. It's kind of been a bit more of what we've previously had. Whereas the Republicans seem to have been a bit more, what's the word? It's kind of like it's not sailing a massive ship in a straight line, and you want to turn it slightly, and it takes ages to turn that massive ship. The Republican Party seems to have been more adept at being able to do that, to switch.
Right. And I think it comes down to the Republican Party has had a succinct message from, let's say, Reagan on, just for the sake of argument. And that is, pro-life, pro-gun, and conservative fiscally, although you question that. You can always question that. And they have been able to rally their base to those particular issues, where the Democratic Party is an umbrella over a number of different things, and immigration, against guns, if you want. So they've been painted this anti-everything.
Yeah, exactly.
They
yeah.
have a more diverse party that they have to play to, which makes it more difficult to stay on message for. So basically, the GOP is on message, has their strength in their message,
and it's pretty
where
simple.
The Democrats tend to fumble that. Yes, it's right, and they fumble that every time. It's frustrating as a Democrat. So, to see that happen. But and honestly, Mick, I mean, my husband and I sit here and look at it and go, they're going to screw this up again.
Yeah. That's my biggest fear. That I'm going, Mick. I keep saying to yourself, Mick, you might have got the candidate right, but you really got you got the election call badly wrong. And I'm thinking, 2020. Don't make that mistake. Don't underestimate the voters. Don't underestimate what will happen, particularly sometimes in those last 3 or 4 weeks.
Exactly. Yeah.
We saw the whole thing with where it kind of exploded with Hillary Clinton, with the whole thing with Comey coming out publicly and people going,
yes,
what the hell are you doing, man? The election's a week away. You can't say that now. Back down.
Right.
Leave it till after the election.
Right. Yeah. Actually, that I think hurt.
I think that was the final blow. That floored. That was the kind of the argument with that 3 or 4 million votes that swung it the other way for her, and just gave Trump just about enough to pinch the electoral college. Right,
because even if it was, we're re-looking at what email servers you use. I mean, when she was first lady and was starting up the healthcare, and that didn't go well, and then there were a few other things that happened, with Hillary. It just brought back all that doubt of, can she really lead us with all of this Watergate, or not Whitewater behind her, and
Yeah.
So, and that's the other good thing too, is a certain party, the GOP, the Republican Party, is very good at finding dirt on people and making that the death. Are you there, Mick?
Yeah, you still there? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I sound just broke up there. Okay. We briefly mentioned the Michael Cohen book. I haven't read it. Have you read it?
No, I have not. Not planning to read it. So.
That's what I want to ask you.
Yeah.
What is it about Michael Cohen? Because we've what's the other guy? Anthony Scaramucci, is it?
Yeah.
We've had all these people who've kind of had this rebirth, this discovery, of, oh, what was I thinking? What was I doing? What's different, or is there anything different about those two? Is there anything different about Michael? Is there anything different about Anthony? What's different about them? They've both written books. They both had this realization in recent years. I'm sure the time behind bars for Michael Cohen might have helped him along his journey, his discovery. But is there anything different about those two, or is this just kind of like a little bit more of what we saw with Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham? It's just kind of like a reset. Okay, get back in line, get on with it.
Yeah, it's
is it a reinvention? Are they trying to reinvent themselves to be relevant?
I think they're just trying to make money for themselves, honestly. Yeah. But it's the reason why I have no interest in the Cohen book or the Bolton book or the Scaramucci book was because they were inside and they had an opportunity to speak out and say what was right. the doors off of things. And it always seemed to come back to, well, I have to worry about the well-being of my family. And if I end up behind bars, I have to write this book so that they have money, whatever. That's what it always seemed like to me. And quite honestly, I don't know, because I have not read the book, but is there anything that is more groundbreaking than what he said at his
when he appeared before Congress,
in front of Congress? Yeah. So if there's that book, as they think there is in the Bolton, into a Bolton investigation, why didn't you say it? Why didn't you do your patriotic duty and say it in front of Congress and in front of the United States? I mean, so yeah, in making somebody like Michael Cohen richer. So, and I really just don't think there's anything in there that's going to be groundbreaking. Otherwise, the press would have been on it already. So that's kind of where I stand with that.
In the past week, since we set up this interview, we had the Bob. Well, yeah, so much happens in Trump world. We had the Bob Woodward book. I suppose I'm not going to talk too long about it. People who follow U.S. Politics will be aware of the 18 interviews that he did, the suggestion, because I'd like to talk a little bit about the current pandemic as well in political terms too. And I also want to talk about the arts before we finish. But just on the Woodward, I suppose the $1 million question, is that another blow to the bow of the, USSS Trump, sailing ship, or will we have forgotten about this in 2 weeks' time when the debates come up?
It should be the last blow to his administration, I feel.
It should be, but then we might have said that about the Russia collusion on many other things.
Exactly. That's one good thing about, the good thing about the Trump administration that they can do is they can take a hit like that and make people forget about it in 2 weeks' time. By
distraction, usually, yeah.
Yes.
Here's something squirrel. Even more crazy.
Right, yeah, squirrel. Yes.
Yeah. Rabbit hole, yeah.
And honestly, the American public has a short attention span to begin with, and this has just made it even shorter. It should have been the final nail in the coffin. It's not the final nail in the coffin. I think the only way it'll be brought up in the debate is Joe saying it, and I think Donald will lie his way out of it. Like he'll duck it and go on to something else, or just blatantly lie and say that it isn't as bad as the world is reporting it to be. When you're over here in the U.S., I don't know how it is in the Netherlands, Mick, but when you're over here in the U.S. and you walk into a place, I had a friend say that they were standing in line and they had their mask on and all this, and this person came up and said, "Well, you can see who the Democrats are," and they didn't. It's that polarization again that is killing people in this country. And as I said to another friend of mine, to me, it's not political anymore. It's human rights. We're down to violating human rights at this point with the ICE detention in Georgia. That's getting a lot of news now from a whistleblower who said that they're removing the uterus and female parts from the women there and then deporting them back to their country. I mean, we're into human rights issues now. We've gone beyond political issues. So.
Well, that takes us to the pandemic, and reflecting on the media, and I don't want this to sound like, oh, well, it's all the US's fault. This wouldn't be happening here, but it wasn't for them. They started all this. It's everywhere. It's the same here. I know it's like that in Ireland. It's like it in the UK. It's like it here in Europe, particularly in countries that have quite a nationalist-based government. There is, I see it, a strong surgence of, anti-mask, conspiracy theories, this is all about vaccinations, um,
Yeah.
and while I don't want to make this sound like I'm blaming the US, I sometimes have to fix in my head if because US media is so powerful into Europe,
Yes.
and so many of us are into and know that this is the proverbial free world leadership we're talking about, and the influence economically, health wise, and just general trends and attitudes that the US can have on the rest of the world, and the influence. I somehow wonder if that wasn't happening in the US, would we have so much protests and just, people not doing what they should be doing, wear a mask, wash your hands regularly, watch your distance. I'm still trying to get my head around if if that base or movement in the US hadn't steadily grown over the past few months. And I can understand the frustration, how because it's been badly handled there, and the loss of life there. But I do wonder if that hadn't have stemmed in the US, would we be seeing as much of that in Europe? And I don't know, maybe I'm in a better position to answer it, but your thoughts on that?
Now, I think if we had better leadership here, and that it would be different through the world. I mean, the rest of the world has always looked to, since what World War II, U.S. as a leadership position, and we've been, through. Let's just say, in the past 4 years, we haven't been doing that.
No.
So the rest of the world still looks at the United States, and there is a starting, I guess, I don't know if you would have a better idea of this because you live in Europe, but I do see that there's some divisiveness also going on in Europe.
No, absolutely, and it's steadily that's been happening. Look, and like I said,
right.
I don't mean to construct the point I'm making as if I'm blaming. That's
no.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm talking a bit more about the media involvement, influence.
Yeah, I think where I was going with that, and I'm not taking it as blame on the U.S., but I'm not. Where I'm going with that is I think that divisive role over in the Europe is also looking at the United States for leadership for their positions. So they find reinforcement in what's going on, their stance as well. We opened Pandora's box, and we aren't going to be able to put everything back in it and close it. And it's going to be the same way worldwide. We're very, very close to, if you look back into the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 30s, we're very much into a very unstable world at this point. And, it's going to take someone with extraordinary leadership skills to come back and make that happen. And do I see that in Joe Biden? Not really, but it's better than, for me, it's better than, what we currently have. We're still going to have two political parties that are basically hating one another at this point. And when you go down that road, it's very hard to climb back up to the high road again.
I want to talk, you're also an artist, a painter. I want to talk a little bit about the current pandemic and the impact, obviously from your perspective in the United States, that it's having on arts and culture. And I know in our whole conversation here, you'd swear there was nothing else to talk about or think about in the United States other than, COVID-19 and Donald Trump and the next election. And in reference to that, I sometimes feel that we can, because we have an instinctive interest and fascination with it, I sometimes think, and this is probably also reflective of your point that, people have very short-term memories sometimes about things. And I think it is that ordinary people are trying to get on with their lives at a very difficult time. And it's like, well, look, I don't even know what was in that Bob Woodward book. I don't even know what was said. I don't pay much attention to the news. You know, I'm fed up with it. I'm sick of it. You know, it's all depressing stuff. Um, but the impact on arts and culture, I certainly feel over here. I know in Ireland there are strong voices from the arts community and culture communities, but we're still not hearing enough about it. And I think intrinsically we're starting to realize that, you know, bar venues, comedy venues, you know, the whole hospitality sector, the huge importance of that that's built into the arts and culture sectors, and the impact it's having effectively, you know, other than online, artists don't have a mode of living and operating as normal, as performing normal, producing their, whether it's content writing, whether it's photography, whether it's paintings, whether it's sculpture, whether it's an actor performing. You know, the impact, you know, on the whole cultural and tourist sectors are just huge, and they're all intertwined.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, as an artist, I can definitely sit up here in my studio and paint and get enough of an inventory that hopefully when the cash flow looks better, that I can start to sell paintings again. But the issue around selling a painting is that's disposable income. Are you going to buy a painting, or are you going to make sure that you have food on the table?
Sure.
Make sure that your house payment's paid. So there's economically, yeah, we're taking hits, and so is the entertainment industry. I have a friend that is a director, and he's in Biloxi filming right now, and it's interesting talking to him because he has a movie coming out in November that's supposed to hit the cinemas, and the issue is we don't even know if the cinemas are going to be open, and if they are open, who's going to go to them? So you know, you spend billions of dollars in the entertainment industry to make a film, and then you're like, well, where should I put it to try and get some of my revenue back? And it's the same all the way down the line. You know, you're writing a book, are people going to buy it? Should I give it away free at this point? You know, how is all this going to work? And the uncertainty around, you know, will we ever get back to normal it can pretty much stop creativity in its tracks.
Yeah,
I mean, you sit there and you know, you
clearly this has an impact in different ways on different artistic sectors. If you're a band, you know, it's like any reality of artistic life. You know, the reality is that you're probably not making a huge amount of money selling records. Your revenue stream is probably primarily coming in from live public performances.
Right.
Similarly for a theatre actor, who's perhaps maybe only doing minor roles in TV and film, but their primary day-to-day job is, you know, acting, treading the boards in the West End or Broadway. You know, that's their bread and butter, and they can't do that at the moment.
Right.
I think it's perhaps marginally easier whether you're a journalist, a writer, a painter, or a sculptor, because you're producing something with a view to, well, hopefully this will all end and there will be a channel to funnel it through and make a living ultimately. But I think if you're a musician, a comedian, or any type of performer, actor, you're in big trouble at the moment.
Right. Right. Yeah. And typically, artists and writers, and you know this, Mick, we typically have making money, a different source of income. I think what the pandemic has done is basically showed us that, you know, it's good that we had some resilience there, but, you know, we really can't count on any sales coming up. So tightening the belt one more notch, you know, to make sure that we can do things as you know, quality as we can, best quality we can, but for less money, so that we're not, you know, pulling money from our economic, the economic side of the house payment and the rent payment or car payment, insurance payments, all those different things. So it's affecting, and it's affecting the artists. It's whether you're an actor, musician, writer, or on down. It's hard to get creative when you know what's going on in the world and people are dying.
It is genuinely, because the nature, I think, of writing, whether you're writing fiction, whether you're writing non-fiction, whether you're a journalist, these are all things that play into, I think I was on a forum there about a month ago, and it's funny when you look at the questions that are being asked now that obviously would never have been asked, a year or two ago. And I saw so many authors asking the question, I'm writing a book, and like I said, it could be non-fiction, or it could be a novel, and asking, do I mention the pandemic?
Right.
Or is that like I'm screwed? Because when you mention something like that, unless it's specifically about a very particular time, or that's the actual subject of your book, I potentially lock that book in to that time fixed. And in 5 years' time, when everybody's forgotten about this pandemic and we all sort of, are amused, at what went on, and not that I'm downplaying the catastrophic amount of deaths, but what I mean, when we reflect back on situations that happened in the world and influence it of that time, and we lock our books into a particular time, because you must experience that as a political thriller writer, and I never know what advice to give them. I sometimes make your novel very atypical of the times, but don't mention very specific things unless it has absolute 100% relevance to what you're writing. Right,
and it's the same. You come down to the same question that I have when I'm writing my political thriller with the historical bent. It's kind of like, do I include the assassination of Anwar Sadat, in Egypt? And I don't use the name, but I use the circumstance of the leader. So if people were reading my book, okay, this is when Sadat passed or was murdered, and so and then that had all kind of ripple effects throughout the book. So so it comes back to the question of, and I think what your advice is right on. Don't get too involved in it, but use it where you can, and if you're using it at a certain point, make sure you stay on point.
Let's try and return back to our main topic as we kind of close out and finalize things. Not that we can, and not that we're staring into the crystal ball, but there's a degree of that has to be done, I think, in any process like this. November election. Donald Trump wins again. Likely, if he wins, it's a narrow win. What's Trump world like for the next 4 years? Will he even last? We got that wrong. We got that wrong last time, and he did last. We thought that he won't last, but he did.
Yeah, I mean, for someone like myself, that my husband actually came to the point of saying that we're going to leave the United States. So hopefully there's room in the Netherlands for us. Come over and visit you or something. But
I've heard so many people say that, if he wins again, I'm leaving. I've so many artists or so many actors, but they never do. You never leave in the end. You stick it out. You go, no, we're in this for the long haul.
Well, honestly, we can't go anywhere. All the borders are closed to us right now.
We're locked in. Yeah, they've thrown away the keys.
I mean, even Canada won't let us in. That's pretty bad. Mexico may be next. They may be saying no, but
I think they already have said that anyway. No, you can't come down there. Our border's closed.
Yeah. That might be true, because I do have an artist friend that's living in Mexico, and he hasn't come home yet, so he may not be able to get across the border. But no, but seriously, I don't know if I can make it another 4 years. I personally, it's and it was like I said to everybody that sits there and says, how come people that aren't as decisive and it's just downright nasty as Trump, he's not, I don't know how to say this without the Secret Service coming after me, but he's made it. Nobody's tried to hurt him, and all this. And it's like, how come that has happened? And somebody else who we really like, let's just say Kennedy at this point, he was very well liked. He gets assassinated, and it's just like,
this world is so unfair.
Slow down a minute. Yeah, but it doesn't change, is what I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
I mean, because then you have Mike Pence in there. The same GOP is in control. He's got the Senate. Of course, the next person in line after that is Speaker Pelosi. But that it's not going to happen. We're going to have another 4 years of him, and if he does get reelected, it's going to be another 4 years of disregarding the rule of law and the checks and balances. And now with Justice Ginsburg's death, if they do ram one of Trump's appointees through, you're looking at a very far right conservative, Supreme Court. I think Justice Roberts has been a. I've read some of his dissents, when he's not done what the Republican Party wants him to do, and I think he's been right on. I think
in general he has not quite been the Trump appointee that perhaps Trump thought he was going to be, but then that's their role. That is what they're supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be, non-political.
Yes, exactly. They're supposed to be looking at the law. That's why they're there. They're supposed to be our top legal minds, if you will.
A little bit like our friend, Attorney General William Barr. You're not supposed to be the president's personal lawyer.
Exactly. And if I were in Congress, I would be asking for his impeachment. But going back to what we said earlier, if Donald Trump does get reelected, the only thing I can hope for at that point is that the Senate turns blue, so that we have some sort of checks and balance that we don't have right now.
And in a Biden world, but again, I want to move and talk about in a Joe Biden world, but it's kind of like you still can't move on from Donald Trump, because the next question then is, will he go easily when he's told, Donald, you lost, just accept it, you lost, can we move on? And it's like he's already setting this up that, we've already pretty much been told we are not going to know the result of the election, possibly for, could be days, it could be a week or two. And he's almost set this up. You can almost hear the ink going to the paper, that he's going to target 8 states and he's going to challenge the election in those states. And this is going to be rambling on for months.
Yeah, and I live in one of them. And it's really interesting because either way I see this, the U.S. is going to be in turmoil. If Donald Trump decides that he's not going to leave, we're going to see a civil war. We've had people who were a lot more informed politically than I am saying that already. And I don't think they're saying it just to scare us into voting for Joe. These are people that are supposed to be, not leaning toward the other. It's nasty. It's going to get very, it's very scary. I voted already. I voted absentee, even though I was, at first it was vote absentee in North Carolina, and now it's just vote early, and and now it's because of Donald Trump's claim that we should vote absentee and then try to vote again, which is a felony.
This is a crazy situation that he's suggesting. It is, but then it's more Trump bizarro world. Right,
exactly. So I don't, like I said, whoever, and that's Joe Biden, because that's who's running against him. To me, anybody who's going to vote third party doesn't understand what kind of leadership we're going to need coming out of this. And the two choices to me are Biden and Trump. The third party candidates don't have enough support in Congress.
No, it's never bad. I think the closest, if I remember correctly, I'm not even going to mention Kim Kardashian's other half, but if I remember correctly, going back over the years, I think the only candidate that I can genuinely think and make an argument that they had some kind of effect on the overall, not changing it, but had an effect on it, was probably, I think was it Ross Perot?
Yes.
I think I don't know how much percentage he took, but he took a significant chunk that may have had some influence on the race.
That was right, and that was basically he took votes from the Democratic candidate and split the Democratic vote to the point where W got elected. That's basically, if you look back and do political analysis, that's basically what has been said about that. So to me, I know that we desperately would love to have a legitimate third party in this country. But all you're going to end up doing is you if you do vote third party.
Yeah.
If you're a Democrat and are voting third party.
Should we be hopeful? Well, I suppose it depends on your persuasion, I guess, as well. I need to be careful here. It does depend on your persuasion.
I just heard the Imperial March from Star Wars going off in my head with that question.
On the window outside. What are you talking about in there?
But yeah, without hope, what are we?
Yeah.
So yeah, I have to be hopeful. So
yeah,
we'll see. And honestly, I mean, if it wasn't Biden, whoever was running against Trump, they have a lot of work ahead of them. And
yeah, it's going to be, regardless, it is going to be a huge challenge. Whoever's there, and if it's Joe Biden, this ain't no cakewalk. This is no walk in the park. This is going to be one extraordinarily tough. Certainly, I think that the first 2 years before the mid-elections coming in 2022, this is going to be, some 2 years, because we already know that whether we like it or not, and I look around Europe and I can already see the plans made in countries, the what they put forward for planning for COVID, and it goes well into 2021. We're going to be living with this probably for at least another year.
Yeah, you went right to where I was thinking. It's like all of my folks that I know and don't know on social media posting until 2020. What do you think in 2021?
Yeah.
Nothing. So we're still going to have COVID with us.
Yeah.
And and even when the vaccine comes out, everybody is not going to be standing in line to get vaccine.
That's going to be another challenge. And this is also what some experts say. We are banking on a progression of pharmaceuticals to produce a vaccine. One, you don't always get a great uptake. I think as the flu, and I don't specifically know in the US, but I know in Ireland and the UK, the uptake in the flu vaccines that people regularly get, it's only about 30 to 40% of people who are in that target area that they feel should take it. So it's not extraordinarily high. You've got these pharmaceutical companies, I think there's 6-9 different tests going on at the moment. We don't know if this virus is going to mutate or alter slightly during the typical flu season. We don't know, because if that happens, we potentially could be in a situation where any produced vaccine is of no actual value by the time we get to next year, and that's another frightening thought.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, they've already identified 8 different mutations of this particular COVID-19.
Yeah,
Now,
because that's
I don't
that's
know.
what a
I mean, I've
virus
read that
does.
in a
A
couple of
virus
different
wants
press.
to live.
Right. And so how are you developing, which mutation are you developing the vaccine for? Is that still the main one, or is it one of the other 7? And like you said, it's going to mutate even further. So especially since everyone is starting into their second wave, and we have the northern hemisphere, and so yeah. I mean, I've heard talk. I think is it. Well, Israel is shutting down or have shut down already. And I believe, is it Italy that's talking about shutting down again, or is it France?
I think so. I think France have talked about it. I don't know whether they have plans yet. I think Italy are, and there's also parts. I think Madrid has been pretty bad in Spain.
Okay.
You know, what I suppose just to sum up in general, we are where we suspected we would be. That pretty much we would. From March through April, May, and we won't go into the whole ins and outs of what happened in the USA and whether they acted quickly enough or did the right things. But I think in general, I'm not convinced things would have been dramatically any different, even if the US had been doing what Europe was trying to do, what was happening in China and South Korea. I think ultimately we always knew we'd get on top of these, we'd push the numbers down, the figures would trail off. But at some point, the second spike would come, and it does now look like we're starting to approach that again. And I think what's happening is in the United States has always been, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, all countries across the board, from the very far east right through across to the west of the United States, countries are in different stages of the COVID-19. And the United States is probably a month to 2 months behind where what we're seeing in Germany, France, the Netherlands, is so kind of like, and I suppose that's how you learn from a pandemic. You look at the countries that first got this, how did they deal with it? What stage are they at now? And the fact and reality is that Germany, Spain, France, Italy are all starting to see spikes again, and it's starting to creep out. I think here in the Netherlands, we're now up to 2,000 a day. Cases. Ireland, I think is up to 250 to between 250 and 350 a day. I'm not sure what the UK is, but I'm pretty sure it's well over 1,000 per day as well. So we're seeing all those countries are back to hitting a spike, a potential autumn winter spike, and probably the US is about 4 to 6 weeks behind. So what's happening in Europe, I'm pretty sure after this election, come late November, you're going to start seeing the same thing. The figures are going to, I think they dropped below 40,000 daily figures. I think you're going to see that figure starting to push back towards 50, 60, 70 again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's what I was going to say is you're looking at 1,000, 2,000 cases. We never really got lower than 20,000 cases.
Yeah, no, once it fully, yeah.
So, so we're at 40,000 now, give or take 1,000. Just the difference in the hearing and stating those numbers is just crazy.
Yeah, it's frightening.
Yeah.
So. I wish we could finish on a more positive note, and I'll try to do that, Linda, by giving you the opportunity, and any of your fans that have tuned in when this broadcast goes out next week. Can you just finish up just by telling us what you're doing at the moment, what projects you're working on, and what events or things as best you can deal with the circumstances at the moment? What's going on for you, and what's happening over the next few months for yourself?
Yeah. So aside from getting out and getting some fresh air and hiking, just so that we have a little bit of being outside in our routines, I'm working on book 5 of the Blind series. And it's really, that's at a point where I'm going through the first edit and asking myself a number of different questions about, is there some other way that I want to bring something in that will help us get to another point, help us be in a different place in the fictional world of 2020. So working on that, doing some painting, especially if I find myself, getting low, and then just kind of trying to make new friends down in Asheville in a time. So it's in a way, I probably should have a lot more time available to work on book 5, but for some reason I don't have as much time as I thought I would have. But so it's the only thing I guess you could say that the COVID-19 has done for us has stopped the socialization of getting out and meeting people. But and eating out and different things like that. But so I guess my day spent cooking, writing and editing, painting, and taking care of my cats, and my husband.
Linda, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we'll have you on again. God knows what we'll be talking about next time, but you never know.
So Mick, can I leave with one? Maybe this would be kind of uplifting for everybody. Is
please
quote
do. Please do.
Yeah. So this is a quote from Justice Ginsburg, and she made this comment some point in her life. I'm not sure what the year was, but it's fight for the things that you care for, but don't fight in a way that will keep others from leading you, from joining you. So I didn't do that quite as much justice as I should. The things you care about, but don't do it in a way that will lead others, or do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So, don't be out there fighting for your cause, but do it in a way so that people come and join you in that fight, because we need unity. We don't need division.
No, absolutely. And on that positive note, Linda, all I can add to that is, look, whatever your political persuasions, Democrat, Independent, Republican, look, please, coming towards the election, get out and vote, or else vote early. We need a decent turnout in the election, because the larger the turnout, the fairer we can argue that's a fair result. We got a decent turnout. If you have very low turnouts, it can have a significant effect on, the impact for both candidates. So regardless of what your political persuasions are, absentee voting, voting by mail, or if you feel that it's safe to go out there and vote, then please do that. Linda, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again. You take care of yourself, your husband, and the cats, and I'll look after this one here who's been roaming around for a while.
Yeah, thanks, Mick.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you to Linda for joining us this evening. Apologies, we had some dropout there on both the video and audio. I hope it didn't affect the listening and viewing. Positive, negatives, take what you will. We are where we are. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to episode 15. Who knows what we'll be talking about and where we will be. Put up Linda's details, her website, where you can find her books, in the descriptions below, wherever you see this. Also the links to Radio Espial, www.radioespial.com, and our channels. Take care. See you again. Wear, watch, wash. Take care.
You have been listening TIPM Media and presented by investigative journalist Mick Rooney. Please feel free to leave a comment and visit our links provided in this podcast production. Thank you for your support.